believing that volume equals value. But true power is not loud. It does not announce itself or rush to be understood. It does not defend its existence. True power is silent, and silence, when rooted in self-mastery, carries weight. In a crowded room, it is never the loudest man who commands attention. It is the one who says nothing and yet bends the atmosphere. The one whose presence feels heavier than his words, whose stillness creates a kind of pressure others cannot ignore. He understands that calm is not the absence of emotion, but dominance over it. Most men are conditioned to chase outcomes, to dominate conversations, to prove worth through effort and display. They perform, they seek validation in reactions. But elite men, men shaped by discipline, restraint, and inner structure, recognize something far more refined. They understand that influence begins before attraction, that respect forms before desire, and that presence speaks long before action ever takes place. Women sense this instinctively, not through logic or conscious analysis, but through intuition. They read the aura before the resume. They feel the shadow before the smile. They notice whether a man is grounded within himself or desperately auditioning for approval. This has nothing to do with conquest or tactics. It is not about manipulation or strategy. It is about perception. The sophisticated man moves like a ghost through social spaces, unrushed, unreactive, unreadable. He does not seek to impress because he understands discovery is far more powerful than display. He allows others to lean in rather than reaching out. Because the highest form of influence is not control over people, situations, or outcomes. It is control over the self. And once this understanding settles into your nervous system, once you feel it rather than merely hear it, your perception changes permanently. You stop chasing noise. You stop explaining your worth. You begin to move differently. And once you see this, you can never unsee it again. Number one, the silent recalibration. Why the sophisticated man stops trying to be understood. At a certain stage of psychological maturity, something subtle but irreversible happens inside a man, and it does not announce itself loudly. There is no ceremony, no applause, no external validation. There is simply a quiet recognition that being understood is not the same as being respected. For most of his early life, he has been conditioned to explain himself, to justify his intentions, clarify his emotions, soften his edges, and narrate his inner world so others feel at ease. This is not weakness, it is social training, a survival mechanism learned in environments where approval felt necessary for belonging. But elite self-mastery begins the moment he notices the cost of constant explanation. He realizes that every unnecessary clarification dilutes presence, that every defensive elaboration leaks authority, and that the more he rushes to be understood, the less grounded he appears. The refined man understands that silence is not emptiness, it is structure. Silence is the absence of chaos, not the absence of thought. Marcus Aurelius did not write to persuade others. He wrote to discipline his own inner world. He did not chase agreement or validation. He cultivated coherence. His power came from internal alignment, not external applause. Women, like all perceptive humans, are exquisitely sensitive to this internal order. They may not consciously articulate it, but they feel when a man's nervous system is regulated, when his emotions are not spilling outward in search of reassurance. This is where the aura begins to form. not as something mystical or performative, but as a biological and psychological signal of self-containment. A man who is not scrambling to be understood communicates safety through stillness. He becomes easier to trust, not because he explains himself well, but because his behavior is consistent across time. Trust does not come from words. It comes from pattern recognition. His presence settles the room without effort. He speaks less, but when he does, his words carry weight, not because he demands attention, but because attention naturally orients towards stability. There is no rush in him, no need to convince, no anxiety about being misread. This is the first realization most men never reach. Explanation is optional when your inner world is already aligned, when your actions speak with such clarity that silence becomes sufficient. Number 2, emotional stillness. As power, what women actually respond to under pressure. In moments of uncertainty, pressure, or emotional complexity, most men reveal more than they intend. Their tone shifts before their words do. Their posture tightens as if bracing for judgment. Their eyes scan the room, unconsciously seeking reassurance or approval. These reactions are subtle, but they are loud to anyone who understands human behavior. The sophisticated man notices this pattern early in life and makes a quiet decision to walk a different path. He does not aim to become emotionless, nor does he indulge every feeling that arises. Instead, he trains himself to metabolize emotion internally. This distinction is critical. Suppression creates internal pressure that eventually leaks out through irritability, resentment, or impulsive action. Integration, on the other hand, creates calm. It allows emotion to move through the body without hijacking behavior. When a man can feel disappointment without broadcasting it, desire without chasing it, curiosity without grasping for control, something remarkable happens. His emotional landscape becomes unreadable in the most refined way. Not hidden, not closed off, but composed. This is where cinematic figures are often misunderstood. Characters like Thomas Shelby are not compelling because of danger, rebellion, or dominance. They are compelling because of restraint. Watch how they pause before responding, even when provoked. Watch how their breathing remains slow while others rush to fill silence. Watch how their eyes stay steady when the environment turns chaotic. These are not intimidation tactics. They are demonstrations of emotional regulation. Regulation communicates mastery, and mastery is felt, not announced. Women sense this immediately, often without being able to explain why. A calm man under pressure signals safety without weakness, strength without volatility. He does not spike the emotional temperature of the room. He stabilizes it. He becomes the shadow, not dark, not threatening, but dimensional. His presence has depth. You feel him even when he is silent. This emotional stillness is not passive, it is active restraint. It is the ongoing choice to remain centered regardless of external turbulence. It communicates that his inner world is not hostage to outcomes, reactions, or approval. And that signal is profoundly grounding to be around, because in a world of emotional noise, the man who governs himself becomes the quiet axis others unconsciously orient around. Number 3, presence over performance. Why the elite man stops managing impressions. At a certain level of maturity, the sophisticated man stops curating himself for reaction and quietly steps out of the marketplace of approval, no longer measuring his words for maximum effect or adjusting his edges to fit the emotional weather of the room. This does not make him rigid or cold. It makes him anchored, internally weighted, unmoved by the need to impress. Performance always demands vigilance, a subtle tension beneath the skin, because it requires constant monitoring of how one is being received, interpreted, and ranked. Presence requires none of this. Presence is self-contained. The difference is almost invisible, yet decisive. A man who is performing is always slightly anxious, even when smiling, because his sense of value is outsourced to response. A man who is present arrives internally complete before the interaction even begins, already settled, already grounded. Women intuitively sense this distinction long before it is consciously named. They feel when attention is offered freely, rather than strategically, when interest is not a tool, but a byproduct. Presence carries a tempo that cannot be faked. It is unhurried. It does not rush to fill silence with noise or words with justification. It allows space to exist without apology. Silence in his orbit becomes textured rather than awkward. This is why refined influence feels effortless. He is not trying to lead the interaction, dominate it, or steer it toward an outcome. He is inhabiting it fully, inhabiting himself fully. His posture is relaxed, not because he's careless, but because there is nothing he is trying to prove. His movements are economical, precise without stiffness. His eye contact is steady, but never invasive, a calm acknowledgement rather than a demand. He becomes a masterpiece, not by seeking admiration, but by eliminating the hunger for it. The need to be seen dissolves, and paradoxically, this is when he becomes impossible to ignore. Attraction shifts here, quietly, from surface-level interest to deeper curiosity, because what strains to be noticed exhausts the senses, but what is complete within itself generates gravity. Mystery is not created by withholding information, but by being unreactive to judgment. When a man is no longer negotiating his worth in real time, others begin to lean in, not to validate him, but to understand him. What does not chase attention invites exploration. What does not pursue creates pursuit. And in this stillness, influence emerges not as a tactic, but as a natural consequence of inner coherence where presence speaks louder than performance ever could. Number 4, the end of reactivity, how self-mastery rewrites. Masculine gravity. Reactivity is one of the most expensive habits a man can carry because it exposes exactly where he is unfinished within himself. Every sharp reply, every rushed explanation, every defensive shift of tone reveals an internal fracture that has not yet been integrated. The elite man does not shame this discovery, nor does he dramatize it. He studies it with surgical calm. He understands that the world is constantly applying pressure, but pressure itself is neutral. It is the response that reveals mastery or immaturity. Between stimulus and response there exists a pause, and within that pause lives power that most men never access. This is not philosophy meant to sound impressive. It is biological reality. The pause regulates the nervous system, slows the limbic reaction, and restores executive control. A man who can pause is a man who can choose, and choice is the foundation of authority. Women observe this far more closely than they admit, often without conscious awareness. They notice how a man responds when challenged, how he behaves when misunderstood, how his presence shifts, when certainty dissolves into ambiguity. They watch whether he rushes to defend his image or allows silence to do the work. The man who does not scramble to correct, convince, or dominate communicates emotional intelligence without uttering a single line of explanation. He becomes emotionally authoritative because he is not seeking validation from the moment. He does not overpower tension. He absorbs it. He does not attempt to control outcomes. He remains centered, regardless of outcome. This centeredness creates stability, and stability is rare. People feel it before they understand it. Conversations unconsciously slow around him. Voices soften. Emotional volatility loses momentum in his presence. Others begin to mirror his composure, not because he demands it, but because nervous systems synchronize with the strongest signal in the room. This is leadership without performance, influence without strategy. The ghost quality emerges here, not as absence, not as emotional withdrawal, but as an ungraspable steadiness. He cannot be pulled into chaos because there is nothing reactive to hook into. He is present yet unreachable by manipulation, calm yet not passive, firm yet not rigid. What cannot be shaken does not need to announce itself. It simply stands. And in a world addicted to noise, that quiet solidity commands respect without ever asking for it. Number 5, independence as emotional wealth. Why optionality changes everything. One of the most misunderstood concepts in masculine development is independence, because it is often mistaken for emotional distance, coldness, or avoidance, when in its refined form it is actually emotional wealth. True independence does not mean a man is disconnected from others. It means his inner stability is not outsourced to approval, attention, or outcomes. His sense of self remains steady, regardless of how he is received. His interest is genuine, but it carries no urgency. His desire is present, but it is not restless or demanding. This subtle distinction changes the entire dynamic of interaction. Neediness accelerates energy outward, creating pressure and imbalance. Desire, when rooted in self-sufficiency, settles inward and radiates calm. Women feel this difference immediately, often without being able to explain it. An internally fulfilled man moves differently. His tone is slower. His presence is grounded. He listens without scanning for validation. He expresses interest without attempting to secure it. When a man is nourished by his purpose, aligned with his personal rhythm, and anchored in self-respect, connection becomes a choice rather than a requirement. This optionality is deeply attractive because it removes emotional pressure from the interaction. There is no invisible contract being formed, no silent expectation that attention must be returned or feelings must be managed. The space feels clean. There is no emotional debt being accumulated. A sophisticated man enjoys connection without clinging to it. He can appreciate closeness without fearing loss. He allows space without retreating into silence or punishment. He understands that emotional freedom is not created by distance, but by non-dependence. He is present, yet complete on his own. This is where masculine gravity becomes natural rather than manufactured. There is no performance, no strategic withdrawal, no attempt to appear aloof. His steadiness speaks for him. People lean in because nothing is being pulled from them. There is no hunger in his energy, only availability. His presence feels safe because it is self-contained. And paradoxically, the less he needs connection to feel whole, the more others feel drawn to share space with him. This is not indifference, it is mastery. It is the quiet confidence of a man who knows that his value is internal and that any connection added to his life is an enhancement, not a lifeline. Number 6, the final integration, self-mastery as the only strategy that endures. Eventually, the sophisticated man arrives at a quiet conclusion, not through sudden revelation, but through long observation of himself under pressure. He realizes there is no technique that replaces inner order, no performance that substitutes for character, and no clever strategy that can outlast genuine self-mastery. He has seen men memorize scripts, postures, and tactics only to unravel the moment something unexpected occurs. In contrast, when a man disciplines his emotions, clarifies his values, and stabilizes his nervous system, something irreversible happens. Influence stops being something he chases and becomes something that follows him naturally. He no longer wakes up asking how to attract, persuade, or impress. Those questions feel juvenile, almost loud. Instead, he asks a quieter, more dangerous question. How do I remain coherent under all conditions? Praised or criticized, desired or ignored, winning or losing. This coherence becomes his signature. It is not flashy. It does not announce itself. It is felt. His aura enters the room before his words do, not because he tries to project power, but because nothing inside him is scrambling for validation. His shadow carries depth rather than threat. It suggests experience, not volatility. He moves through rooms like a ghost, present, composed, and memorable without effort, because he is not leaking energy through anxiety, neediness, or over-explanation. People sense that he is internally settled, and that unsettles them in a strange, magnetic way. This is not about superiority or standing above others. It is about completion. When a man becomes whole within himself, interactions stop feeling transactional. He is no longer trying to get something from people, and because of that, people feel oddly safe and seen around him. Conversations deepen without force. Respect emerges without demand. Others begin to sense themselves more clearly in his presence, as if his calm acts like a mirror that reflects their own inner state. Some rise to meet it, some retreat. Both reactions are information, and he remains unchanged by either. That ultimately is the highest form of influence. Not in control, not dominance, not manipulation, but a calm, grounded clarity that subtly reshapes the emotional environment, simply by existing, by being ordered inside, by no longer needing to be anything other than exactly who he already is. There is a particular kind of man who moves through life quietly, yet unmistakably. A man who does not demand attention, but unintentionally draws it. He is present without being loud, confident without boasting, and grounded without needing external validation. These men rarely fit into the traditional social structures or expectations that most people live by. Instead, they move with intention, independence, and clarity. And because of this, others sometimes feel the need to shape them, influence them, or subtly guide them into being more predictable, more manageable, more controllable. But the Sigma male does not bend easily. His life is built on internal reference points rather than external pressure. He knows who he is when the world is silent, when no one is watching, and when there is no applause to chase. His identity is not borrowed. It is built. And anything built from the inside out cannot be easily swayed from the outside in. When people try to control him, something interesting happens. Not dramatic, not explosive, but deeply telling. People expect the Sigma to react the same way others do, to comply, to avoid conflict, or to quietly adapt, to keep the peace. Instead, the Sigma male responds with a calm withdrawal, a thoughtful silence, a sudden shift in his distance, his priorities, or his presence. It's not revenge, not punishment, not rebellion. It's simply alignment. The Sigma moves away from anything that pulls him out of authenticity. In a world full of noise, he protects his inner stillness. In a world full of influence, he protects his sovereignty. And in a world full of expectations, he protects his freedom. This is why attempts to control a Sigma male always have the opposite effect. Instead of bringing him closer, they push him away. Instead of gaining power over him, people lose connection with him. Instead of shaping him, they reveal themselves. Today we're going to break down what actually happens when people try to control a Sigma male, not in a dramatic or confrontational way, but in the calm, steady reality that defines his nature. These quiet shifts reveal truths about his character, his boundaries, and his inner strength. Let's begin. Number 1, he becomes silent instead of reactive. When others try to pressure or override him, the Sigma does not respond with noise, arguments, or dramatic resistance. Instead, something far more unsettling happens. He becomes quiet. This silence is not a retreat, and it is certainly not weakness. It is a psychological posture rooted in clarity, self-possession, and emotional discipline. In behavioral psychology, this is known as a low reactivity response, a trait closely associated with individuals who operate from an internal locus of control. Rather than allowing external chaos to provoke him, the Sigma male processes information inwardly. He listens without rushing to defend himself, observes without revealing his thoughts, and evaluates the situation with a level of emotional neutrality that many people find disarming. Controlling personalities expect conflict. They are used to reactions, protests, or even emotional outbursts. But the Sigma gives them none of that. His calmness becomes a mirror, reflecting the other person's insecurity, impatience, or need for dominance. This is why silence becomes one of his most powerful tools. Researchers in interpersonal communication highlight that silence can signal confidence when paired with steady nonverbal cues. Slow breathing, grounded posture, and measured eye contact, all of which the Sigma naturally maintains. It communicates without words that he is not threatened, not impressed, and not manipulable. And because he is someone who values autonomy above all else, he uses silence as a way to determine another person's true intentions. Do they respect boundaries? Do they grow uncomfortable when they cannot control the narrative? Do they become aggressive when their influence fails? By remaining quiet, he gains the clarity to answer these questions with precision. Meanwhile, the controlling person begins to feel off balance. Humans are psychologically wired to become uneasy when expected patterns break. When they anticipate resistance, but receive stillness instead, their mind scrambles to fill the silence, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with frustration, and often with self-doubt. That is the Sigma's silent strength, his refusal to play the emotional tug-of-war. And because he is not fueled by ego or the need to prove himself, he walks away from manipulation with ease. His silence functions like a boundary drawn in the sand, firm yet peaceful. It teaches others how to treat him without a single raised voice, without confrontation, and without emotional drama. In a world that glorifies noise, reaction, and dominance, the Sigma's quiet becomes his signature form of power, thoughtful, controlled, and impossible to manipulate. Number 2, he withdraws his presence gradually. Control causes the Sigma to distance himself, not dramatically but steadily, in a way that feels almost invisible at first. When a Sigma senses that someone is trying to influence his thoughts, decisions, routines, or identity, he instinctively begins to pull back. This response isn't meant to punish or manipulate. It is a protective mechanism deeply rooted in autonomy psychology and self-determination theory, both of which explain that individuals who thrive on independence will retreat when they feel their freedom is threatened. A Sigma male operates from an internal locus of control, meaning he believes his life direction should come from within, not from external demands or expectations. So when control enters the dynamic, he begins to conserve his energy. He stops sharing personal details, because vulnerability is something he offers selectively, not freely. Psychologically, we share the most with people who make us feel safe, respected, and unpressured. The moment Sigma men feel someone is prying or subtly steering their choices, they instinctively reduce the flow of personal information to protect their inner world. This withdrawal also shows up in how he stops initiating plans. Social psychologists refer to this as boundary-based distancing, a natural human response to environments that feel restrictive. The Sigma doesn't storm out, argue, or create drama. Instead, he lets silence do the talking. He slowly removes himself from situations where his independence feels compromised. This isn't avoidance, it is self-preservation. Research on introverted dominance traits shows that individuals who rely heavily on introspection and personal autonomy are more likely to step away than confront, because confrontation often feels like another attempt to pull them into someone else's emotional orbit. That's something the Sigma refuses to entertain. His emotional and mental energy also becomes more guarded. When someone tries to control him, he instinctively redirects his attention inward toward things he can shape and influence, his projects, his goals, and his self-improvement routines. He withdraws not to create confusion, but to regain equilibrium. For Sigma men, emotional investment must be reciprocal, not dictated. They engage deeply only when they feel respected for who they authentically are. When control enters the dynamic, the Sigma's mind begins to evaluate, am I still myself here? Is my identity being altered? Do I feel free? If the answer is no, distancing becomes not just a reaction, but a requirement for his psychological health. In the end, his withdrawal is a quiet reminder of one defining truth about Sigma males. They cannot be molded, managed, or manipulated. The moment someone attempts to reshape who they are, the Sigma retreats to protect the most valuable thing he owns, his autonomy. Number 3, he reassesses the relationship objectively. When a Sigma male senses a shift in a relationship, he does not explode, confront dramatically, or react impulsively. Instead, he steps back into a mental space where emotion is quiet and observation takes the lead. Rather than responding through anger or insecurity, he evaluates the relationship the way a strategist evaluates a battlefield, with clarity, precision, and logic. This isn't coldness, it's emotional intelligence. Studies in psychology often show that men who rely on introspection and low reactivity decision-making tend to experience healthier long-term outcomes because they avoid the trap of emotional escalation. The Sigma is one of those men. He asks himself essential questions. Is this connection balanced? Does it encourage growth? Is there mutual respect, or are there subtle attempts to influence, guilt trip, or reshape him into something more convenient? These questions are not asked in paranoia, but in self-awareness. He understands patterns, and he pays attention to tone, timing, consistency, and energy. He notices when someone's affection becomes conditional, when boundaries are crossed, or when manipulation shows up in soft forms like silent treatment, passive pressure, or emotional dependency, because he doesn't force relationships to work. He allows the truth to reveal itself. If the dynamic is healthy, he invests. If it is draining, he disconnects quietly. Many relationships dissolve at this stage, not through chaos or shouting, but through clarity. The Sigma does not sabotage anything. He simply chooses not to stay in environments where he must shrink to keep the peace. Research on attachment styles and emotional autonomy shows that individuals with secure independence are less likely to tolerate one-sided relationships. And this is exactly where the Sigma stands. He moves with inner certainty rather than fear of loss. People often misinterpret this as detachment, but it is actually maturity. The Sigma understands that staying in a relationship out of obligation or emotional pressure only breeds resentment. Instead, he respects the natural flow of human connection. If two people are aligned, the bond strengthens. If not, it fades. He is never threatened by endings because he knows endings create space for authenticity. When a Sigma walks away, it isn't revenge or punishment. It's a return to equilibrium. It's his quiet commitment to living a life guided by honesty, self-respect, and meaningful connection rather than emotional chaos or control. Number 4, he reinforces his boundaries calmly. If he chooses to stay connected, the Sigma sets boundaries with a firm but gentle consistency that often surprises people. He doesn't raise his voice, deliver long lectures, or rely on emotional pressure. Instead, he expresses his limits the way a skilled craftsman measures a line, calmly, precisely, and with intention. He simply states what he will not accept, then follows through without drama, disappointment, or negotiation. These boundaries are not impulsive reactions to stress or frustration. They are rooted in deeply held principles shaped by years of self-reflection, personal standards, and psychological clarity. Research in personality psychology often shows that individuals with high autonomy and internal motivation tend to rely on values rather than social approval when making decisions. This is exactly what makes the Sigma's boundaries so unshakable. They aren't created to punish others. They exist to protect his peace, his energy, and the life he has carefully built. When he says no, he means it. Not because he is stubborn, but because he understands that inconsistency invites disrespect. Humans are naturally conditioned by patterns. When someone's boundaries shift depending on mood, relationships become unstable. But a Sigma's steadiness sends a different message. This is a man who knows who he is, what he stands for, and what he will not tolerate. And that clarity in itself commands respect. This calm approach is also deeply disarming. People expect pushback, arguments, or attempts to negotiate. Instead, the Sigma's quiet firmness removes any psychological leverage. His refusal is so steady, so unrehearsed, and so free of emotional charge that the other person quickly realizes manipulating or persuading him is impossible. He is not controlled by approval, guilt, or pressure. He is guided by principles, often shaped by Stoic philosophy, which teaches that a man should control his internal world regardless of the chaos around him. This is why the Sigma's boundaries often feel different from the typical man's. They are not walls built out of fear, but gates built out of wisdom. And once he sets a standard, he lives by it, even when it's inconvenient. People eventually understand that testing him is pointless. He will walk away before he allows disrespect to take root. But if someone honors his boundaries, he becomes loyal, present, and deeply genuine. To him, boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about allowing the right people in. Number 5, he becomes even more independent. Attempts to control a Sigma male often trigger a quiet yet powerful shift inside him, one that works in direct opposition to what the controlling person intends. Instead of becoming compliant or influenced, he becomes more self-reliant, more anchored, and more inwardly fortified. This response is rooted in a very real psychological principle. Individuals with strong internal loci of control naturally resist external pressure because their sense of direction comes from within, not from outside forces. When someone tries to steer his decisions, dictate his behavior, or subtly influence his path, the Sigma male instinctively retreats deeper into his autonomy. He strengthens his routines as a way of reinforcing his identity, grounding himself in habits and disciplines that reflect who he truly is. His solitude becomes more intentional, not as a form of withdrawal, but as a recalibration space where he can hear his own thoughts clearly again. Modern psychology notes that people who value independence often need periods of isolation to restore cognitive clarity and emotional balance, making this response not only symbolic, but also biologically rooted in how the brain manages stress and autonomy. During these moments, he focuses intensely on personal growth, elevating himself rather than engaging in power struggles. It's here that the paradox reveals itself. Attempts to control him don't shrink him, they expand him. Instead of being pulled off course, he doubles down on his own direction with greater precision and purpose. This is partly due to what behavioral scientists call psychological reactance, a natural pushback that occurs when someone feels their freedom is being threatened. For the Sigma male, whose entire identity is built on independence, this effect is amplified. The more someone tries to mold him, the more he returns to his core values, goals, and long-term vision. He becomes sharper, more disciplined, and more focused on the life he wants to build. This dynamic shows up in everyday life as well. If someone tries to pressure him into changing his lifestyle, he becomes more dedicated to his routines. If someone tries to dominate him emotionally, he invests more deeply in inner peace and emotional intelligence. If someone tries to influence his decisions, he becomes more analytical and self-directed. Over time, these repeated attempts to control him shape him, but in the opposite direction intended. He becomes wiser, calmer, and harder to manipulate. The Sigma male does not rebel loudly, nor does he engage in unnecessary conflict. His quiet resistance is far more effective. He simply grows in the direction that belongs to him and him alone. Number 6, he walks away without warning. When someone persistently tries to control or limit a Sigma male's freedom, something subtle but powerful happens inside him. He does not fight, shout, or argue because he understands, consciously or instinctively, that engagement feeds the conflict. Psychologists describe this as an avoidant, dismissive response, common among highly independent personalities who value autonomy above social approval. Instead of reacting emotionally, the Sigma quietly steps back, observing the situation like a strategist rather than a participant. He listens, he evaluates, and he notices patterns of manipulation, boundary crossing, or attempts to impose expectations on his life. And when he concludes that this dynamic threatens his inner peace or personal identity, he leaves, not out of coldness or cruelty, but out of self-preservation and psychological integrity. His exit is never dramatic. There is no slammed door, no public confrontation, and no emotional monologue meant to teach someone a lesson. He simply stops showing up. Conversations fade, presence becomes sparse, and eventually his absence settles into place as the unspoken truth. This behavior is backed by the concept of silent withdrawal, a technique recognized in behavioral psychology, where individuals remove themselves from situations that compromise their values rather than engaging in conflict they see as pointless. For Sigmas, the departure itself is the final message. It says more than anger ever could. It communicates boundaries, self-respect, and the refusal to be controlled. People who once tried to confine him are left confused, replaying interactions and wondering how they lost access to someone who never demanded anything but mutual respect. And this is the part most never understand. The Sigma's vanishing act is not punishment. It is clarity. It is the natural consequence of trying to control a man whose entire identity is rooted in self-direction. When a Sigma male walks away, he teaches a profound lesson without uttering a single word. His freedom is not negotiable, and anyone who tries to take it will one day learn the weight of his absence. Sigmas, take a moment. Imagine standing on the edge of a forest at dusk. The shadows lengthen. You hear rustling leaves and unseen shapes shifting in the underbrush. Most men shrink back. Most men feel the chill of what might lurk, but you don't, because you are different. What most perceive as fear, you recognize as a doorway, a threshold to something stronger, clearer, truer. In our society, fear is not just a feeling. It is a gatekeeper. It stands between the man you are now and the man you could become. It whispers, don't take the leap, stay safe, stay small. Many listen, many stay inside the circle of comfort. But a high-value man, a Sigma male, looks at that gatekeeper and sees an invitation. What follows are 6 things that most men are afraid of, but the Sigma male is not. These 6 are the quiet, subtle arenas of life, where true masculinity flexes, not with brash force, but with calm strength. They are not glamorous. They are not viral. They are not about rushing adrenaline. They are about standing firm, speaking softly and acting rightly, even when everyone else trembles. We'll talk about inner emptiness, the unknown path, real solitude, emotional honesty, radical responsibility, and walking away from what doesn't align. These may sound scary to the average man, because most men are taught to fear them, because society treats them as threats. But the Sigma male understands these are not threats. They are the foundations. When you are unafraid of the scary things, you step into your own zone of power. So slow down your breathing, settle your mind, let the ambient sounds fade. In this moment, you will be introduced to 6 hidden truths, the truths that many avoid, the truths that sharpen you, set you apart, and make you quietly formidable. If you're ready, let's walk into the shadows together and discover what the fearless man really sees. Number 1, embracing solitude without shame. Most men fear being alone because solitude forces them to confront the parts of themselves they often avoid. In a world obsessed with constant noise and validation, silence can feel intimidating. But the Sigma male sees it differently. For him, solitude is not a punishment. It's a privilege. It's in the stillness that he finds his true power. While others drown in distractions to escape their thoughts, the Sigma dives into them, using quiet moments to sharpen his clarity and understand his inner world. Modern psychology even supports this perspective. Studies from institutions like Harvard and the University of Virginia have shown that people often find silence uncomfortable because it leaves them alone with their thoughts, something most are untrained to handle. The Sigma, however, has mastered this art. He doesn't see being alone as loneliness. He sees it as freedom from dependence. When he's by himself, he doesn't crumble. he calibrates. Solitude becomes his training ground, where his goals are refined, his weaknesses are exposed, and his focus strengthens. This is where true emotional intelligence grows, because without external noise, he can finally listen to his inner voice without distortion. He learns to enjoy his own company, which gives him an advantage in a world where most people fear disconnection. Studies on self-awareness and mindfulness reveal that people who spend time alone develop stronger emotional regulation and resilience. The Sigma male instinctively understands this truth. His peace doesn't come from others, but from alignment within himself. Philosophers like Nietzsche and thinkers like Marcus Aurelius spoke about solitude as a sacred practice, a path toward authenticity. The Sigma mirrors this ancient wisdom. He uses isolation not as withdrawal, but as transformation. It's where he plans, reflects, and grows beyond the limits society tries to impose. Others may see solitude as emptiness, but he sees it as space, space to breathe, think, and become. And when he returns to the world, he's more centered, self-assured, and impossible to manipulate. He is not swayed by approval or afraid of silence, because he knows who he is when the noise fades. That's the essence of a Sigma male, calm in solitude, sharp in purpose, and free in spirit. While most men run from the mirror, he stands before it, unflinching, unafraid, and fully awake. Number 2, facing uncertainty with calm. Everyone fears uncertainty. It's part of our human wiring. Our brains crave predictability because it gives us a sense of safety. From an evolutionary standpoint, this made sense. Knowing where to find food or how to avoid danger kept our ancestors alive. But in the modern world, that instinct often traps people in anxiety, financial insecurity, relationship ambiguity, and career shifts all trigger the same survival circuits that once warned us of predators. The Sigma male, however, approaches this differently. He understands that life isn't a fixed route with signposts. It's a wilderness that constantly reshapes itself. Instead of obsessing over what lies ahead, he focuses on developing his inner compass, his values, discipline, and adaptability. These become his guide when no map exists. In psychology, this quality aligns with what researchers call a high tolerance for ambiguity, a trait linked to creativity, leadership, and emotional stability. People who cultivate it are better at making decisions with incomplete information and maintaining calm in chaos. The Sigma male exemplifies this. He doesn't need external validation or guarantees because his confidence stems from self-trust. He knows that every unknown path, no matter how uncertain, offers lessons disguised as challenges. This mindset transforms fear into fuel. While others freeze under the weight of uncertainty, he moves forward, learning to improvise, adapt, and grow stronger with each step. History offers many examples of individuals who thrived in uncertainty. Think of explorers who sailed uncharted seas, inventors who failed hundreds of times before breakthroughs, or leaders who stood firm amid crises. They shared one thing: resilience built on conviction, not certainty. Similarly, the Sigma male's strength lies in his ability to stay grounded in principle when everything around him shifts. He treats unpredictability not as a threat, but as a proving ground for his spirit. In essence, he replaces fear of the unknown with curiosity about it. He knows that clarity doesn't come before the journey. It comes through it. Each misstep, setback, and detour becomes a teacher. The Sigma male trusts that if his compass, his integrity, discipline, and faith remains steady, He can walk confidently even when the fog of uncertainty hides the horizon. To him, the unknown isn't a prison of anxiety, it's an open field of possibility, waiting for those brave enough to step into it. Number 3, speaking truth when it's uncomfortable. Truth-telling is one of the rarest and most courageous acts in a world that often rewards performance over authenticity. A high-value man understands that honesty is not about aggression or arrogance. It's about alignment. He realizes that the moment he begins to hide his truth to maintain approval, he sacrifices his integrity and weakens his inner foundation. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on emotional suppression show that those who avoid truth to keep the peace experience higher stress and lower self-esteem over time. The high-value man, however, chooses a different path. He speaks gently but with conviction. His words are measured, deliberate, and born from clarity rather than ego. He knows that truth doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It simply has to be real. In the realm of social dynamics, most people are conditioned to avoid conflict. They fear rejection, disapproval, or confrontation. Yet this fear enslaves them. They wear masks, telling others what they want to hear, all while betraying their own beliefs. A high-value man refuses to live this way. He recognizes that authenticity attracts respect, even from those who may initially disagree. Research in leadership psychology has shown that individuals who communicate truthfully with empathy and composure are consistently perceived as more trustworthy and competent. In essence, integrity commands authority. But this doesn't mean he seeks to expose others or create tension. Instead, he uses truth as a form of service to himself and those around him. When he speaks, he seeks clarity, not chaos. His honesty might make others uncomfortable, but it also brings light into dark corners where denial once thrived. In personal relationships, he values transparency over pretense, knowing that love without honesty is fragile. In his professional life, he sets boundaries and expresses ideas even when it's unpopular, because he knows silence in the face of injustice or misalignment erodes both soul and purpose. Ultimately, a high-value man lives in alignment with his words. His truth is not a weapon, it's a compass. It guides his actions, shapes his character, and builds the foundation of trust upon which his legacy stands. He understands that while truth may sometimes isolate him temporarily, it always strengthens him eternally. In a world addicted to appearances, his quiet honesty becomes revolutionary, a rare and noble form of strength. Number 4, letting go of what doesn't serve him. Most people cling to comfort like a safety blanket. They stay in familiar routines, tolerate draining relationships, and settle for jobs that no longer challenge or inspire them, because stepping into the unknown feels terrifying. The Sigma male, however, operates from a different mindset. He understands that growth rarely occurs in comfort. From a psychological perspective, this aligns with the principle of optimal anxiety, a concept in behavioral science suggesting that a small degree of discomfort pushes individuals toward higher performance and transformation. Where others see risk, he sees opportunity. Where most see loss, he perceives liberation. This isn't recklessness, it's calculated detachment, grounded in a deep awareness that clinging to what no longer serves you prevents what's meant for you from arriving. In evolutionary psychology, the human brain is wired to seek familiarity. Routines conserve energy, and predictability signals safety to the limbic system. But this same wiring often traps people in mediocrity. The Sigma male consciously breaks this loop. He views endings not as failures, but as necessary transitions. When he walks away from a comfortable job, a draining social circle, or a shallow relationship, it's not because he lacks loyalty or ambition. It's because he refuses stagnation. In Stoic philosophy, this mirrors the teaching of Epictetus. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Letting go for him isn't a loss, it's a return to freedom. By releasing attachments, he creates space for alignment. Psychologically, this act of detachment rewires neural pathways, shifting focus from dependency to self-mastery. Studies in neuroscience show that when we detach from habitual sources of dopamine, like comfort or social validation, the brain begins to reorient toward intrinsic rewards such as growth, purpose, and creativity. That's why Sigma males often appear calm, even when everything around them is changing. They thrive in solitude, where others might panic because they know transformation begins in silence, not in noise. In a world obsessed with comfort, the Sigma male stands as a quiet rebel, someone who understands that the greatest risks often hide the greatest rewards. His courage to walk away isn't born of arrogance, but of wisdom. He knows that true expansion requires space, and sometimes that space only appears when you're brave enough to let go of everything that once made you feel safe. Number 5, shouldering responsibility without victimhood. Blame is safe because it shifts the weight of failure elsewhere. Excuses are shields because they protect a fragile ego from the sharp edge of truth. Most men, when faced with challenge or loss, instinctively reach for one of these two defenses. They blame their upbringing, their boss, their circumstances, or the system. They excuse their lack of progress with stories about bad luck, unfair treatment, or poor timing. But in doing so, they unknowingly surrender their greatest power, the power to take control of their own destiny. The Sigma male, however, lives differently. He understands that responsibility may feel heavy, but it is also liberating. When he accepts ownership of his actions, he gains authority over his results. He stops being a victim of life's conditions and becomes the author of his reality. This mindset is grounded in a psychological principle known as locus of control. Those with an internal locus believe they can influence outcomes through their own efforts, while those with an external locus believe that fate, luck, or others decide for them. Studies show that people with an internal locus of control tend to be more resilient, confident, and successful. The Sigma male embodies this. He doesn't wait for approval or rescue. He doesn't crave validation from society, and he doesn't complain about how unfair life is. He simply acts. When he fails, he studies the fall, not to wallow in guilt, but to refine his method. He learns, adapts, and moves forward. In a world that rewards excuses and celebrates victimhood, taking responsibility can seem almost rebellious. Yet it's the foundation of true freedom. Every time a man says, "It's my fault and I will fix it," he takes one step closer to mastery. Every time he says, "I choose," he reclaims control from the chaos around him. This doesn't mean he never stumbles or doubts himself. It means he refuses to live in helplessness. Responsibility gives him direction. Excuses only drain him. The Sigma male knows that the cost of ownership is discomfort, but the reward is self-respect. So he stands upright in life's storms, neither seeking pity nor permission. He knows that power isn't handed to those who hide from blame. It's earned by those who face it and rise. Number 6, seeking depth over surface approval. Approval from the crowd may feel comforting, but it also demands the sacrifice of self. In a world built on validation, likes, and digital applause, the Sigma male walks a different road. He understands that popularity is not the same as purpose. The comfort of being approved by others often comes at the price of authenticity. Psychologists refer to this as social conformity, a phenomenon where individuals suppress their true beliefs and instincts to align with the group's expectations. The Sigma male rejects this silent surrender. He would rather be misunderstood for his depth than celebrated for his conformity. His focus is not on how many people are watching, but on who he is becoming when no one is. In ancient philosophy, thinkers like Socrates were known to challenge the status quo at the cost of ridicule or even death. The Sigma carries a similar mindset. He values inner truth above public acceptance. He pursues mastery over recognition, knowing that mastery is eternal, while applause is temporary. In neuroscience, mastery triggers deeper satisfaction through what's called flow state, a psychological zone where time fades and focus becomes pure. This is where the Sigma thrives, working in silence, refining his craft, and building substance while the world chases spectacle. He understands that the pursuit of excellence, not external approval, is the true path to fulfillment. In his relationships, he values depth over numbers. While others collect acquaintances like trophies, he seeks meaningful connections that sharpen his intellect and strengthen his spirit. Studies in social psychology show that people with fewer but deeper relationships often experience higher life satisfaction and emotional stability. This truth resonates deeply with the Sigma's minimalist nature. He doesn't crave the noise of attention, he seeks the stillness of authenticity. The crowd may celebrate the loudest voice, but history remembers the quiet mind that changed the world. From Nikola Tesla's solitude to Marcus Aurelius's reflective journals, the greatest thinkers lived not for applause, but for alignment with truth, purpose, and inner peace. The Sigma male embodies this timeless lesson that true worth is not measured by how many eyes watch you, but by how deeply your actions echo when no one does. He knows the lasting value always lies beneath the surface, where applause fades but character endures. So, there you have it. 6 things that many men fear, yet the Sigma male greets with calm assurance. These are not explosive superpowers. They are the quiet foundations of true masculine value. As you move forward today, remember, growth often walks through the door of discomfort. You don't have to fear the shadow, you can step into it, and when you do, you become something rare. Having said this, if you found this helpful, subscribe and let's continue the journey together.